All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Slay at Home Speaker Series. We're coming to you live every Thursday at 6 p.m., 5 p.m. Pacific time tonight. And we have a wide variety of great topics for you every week, ranging from gear, backcountry travel, trip planning, and we're finally into the terrain discussion section of our webinar series. So if you haven't checked out all the episodes of the Slay at Home series, make sure you go to westonbackcountry.com and click on our education page. Also give us a like or a follow there on Facebook, or join our YouTube channel, and you can see all the past episodes and all the great variety of topics and speakers that we've had present. So thanks for tuning in this evening. Let us know where you're tuning in from tonight. We'll kind of let a few more people trickle in here, but I am seeing a ton of people from Washington, seeing a lot of Oregon, which is fantastic to see, even some Colorado and California in there, and even a few of our brethren from the Great White North, seeing some BC, which is always fun to see. So yeah, keep letting us know where you're coming in from. Oh, it looks like we got a Kansas there now. Awesome. So thank you guys again for tuning in tonight. We really love connecting with the whole Weston crew here and seeing where you guys are tuning in from. So with that being said, tonight's episode, we are covering Pacific Northwest touring zones. And as always, tonight's presentation is sponsored by the fine folks at Weston. Beacon Guidebooks is also one of our fine sponsors this evening. They do a lot of great work, and they've got a lot of great guidebooks out there to kind of help you pick out where you want to go tour. So other sponsors include Burrell Adventures, an amazing new guide service that has just opened up in the Pacific Northwest. Pro Guiding Service, a long time excellent guiding service out there as well, another Weston partner. And then Backcountry Adventure Guides, another fantastic guide service up there in the Pacific Northwest. So make sure you're reaching out to these companies if you're looking to hire a guide in the Pacific Northwest. These are the best in the business, and we really recommend connecting with these guys and going out with them if you have the opportunity. I am your host, Ben Hilly, also known as @Ben in the Backcountry if you want to get a hold of me on Instagram. I'm our brand experience manager. So I've been a backcountry guide for over a decade here in Colorado, and guided everything from snowmobiling, a little bit of skiing, to hiking, biking, fishing. Still do a little jeeping in the summers, but just love being in the mountains and sharing, education and experience with anybody that'll listen. So really happy to have assembled the team of panelists that we have here tonight. I also work on our design team, so I get to work on all the great split boards and fun projects that we have going on here at Weston. Next up, we've got Jere Burrell. Jere, thanks so much for being here, buddy. We are stoked to have you.
Yeah, Ben, stoked to be here too. Ready to chat about some of my favorite spots. So
awesome. Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, Jere. Where do you work at? How long you been up there in the Pacific Northwest?
Just quick rundown. I moved here from Colorado maybe 7 years ago, where I guided throughout the Rockies there, and mostly been based in the Mount Baker area since then. But I've worked all over the Cascades, mostly for pro guiding service, and this year started my own guide service, Burrell Adventures, based primarily at Mount Baker. And over that time, taught everything from rock climbing to alpine climbing and ice climbing, backcountry skiing and snowboarding, and avalanche education.
Love it. You even used to moonlight in Japan a little bit too. You're a great resource for that kind of knowledge too, aren't you?
Yep. Spent the winter there last year. Awesome experience. Ready to go back. Probably won't be this year, but next year, definitely looking forward to it. But
the Cascades have really left a mark on you, I can see. We've tried to drag Jere back here to Colorado, and he's just not having it.
No, this is home. Definitely dig it.
Love it, buddy. Well, thanks again for being here, guys. If you have any questions for Jere, make sure you let us know, down there in the chat. I'll kind of be following along on the chat tonight, guys. And if you do have questions, let us know. Otherwise, you can put it up in the Q&A as well. So just let us know. And we'll get you those answers. Our next presenter is Matt Schonwald of BC Adventure Guides, also a fantastic author for Beacon Guidebooks. Matt, Thanks for tuning in, brother. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah. Thanks for the invite. It's my favorite topic, where to go skiing.
Yeah, buddy. So tell us a little bit about, what books you've written for Beacon Guides, and tell us a little bit about the guide service you run.
So we started with Snoqualmie Pass. We just printed the second edition, which added another 40 tours, bringing it up to almost 140 lines. And then we did Crystal, where I worked as a patroller for 6 years. And we also did Mount Baker back when I was a guide at American Alpine Institute. And then we're about to go to print on Hurricane Ridge.
Killer. Well, awesome. I'm stoked. I have a fine collection of Beacon Guidebooks. I'll definitely pick up Hurricane Ridge when it comes out. I wish I used them a lot more, but usually it's just me being jealous of all the great terrain you guys have up there, and hoping when I do come visit, it's sunny.
Yeah, let me know.
Awesome, brother. Well, thanks again for being here. And our next presenter is Kiira. Kiira is a familiar face around here at Weston. She's already been a panelist at one of the Slay at Home series. But Kiira, thanks so much for being here. Tell the crowd a little about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Ben. Hi, everybody. My name's Kiira. I am also originally from Colorado, moved out to the Pacific Northwest about 4 years ago. I am coming into my third season with RMI, that's Rainier Mountain Incorporated. And I talked a couple weeks ago about Leave No Trace in the Backcountry. So if you guys have questions about that, you can look back in the Slay at Home series and find me there. But excited to be here tonight.
Awesome. Kiira, thanks so much for being here. And to all of our great panelists, we are stoked to have you here tonight. These presenters are some of the top people in their fields. So definitely make sure and reach out here. If you've got questions, let us know. Tonight, we're going to be discussing quite a bit. So we'll try to get through it, as quick as we can, and then even open it up to discussion. So if there's a zone that you guys are curious about, just ask us. That's what we're here for. So the agenda for tonight, we'll kind of discuss preparation and have kind of a quick disclaimer. Obviously, choosing the terrain and a zone you're going to go ride is pretty much the last thing you should be looking at. There's a whole lot of things that go into backcountry travel before you ever get to actually choosing some terrain. And we've covered a lot of that stuff. We'll also discover ATES, the Avalanche Terrain Evaluation Scale, here in a second. We'll be discussing Mount Baker, Stevens Pass, Hurricane Ridge, Snoqualmie Pass, Crystal Mountain, and then we've even thrown in Mount Rainier, which is obviously not, a beginner introductory area, but there's some zones there you might not be aware of. So we want to discuss all that with you. And the overwhelming theme for this evening is, we're trying to give you guys some zones to check out this season, to kind of get away from the crowds, to explore a new area, to, find a mellow area to ride in when maybe the snowpack's not so great or the weather's not so great. We just want to give you guys, a spark, and, all of these areas you'll need to research on your own, and really put in that work to correctly plan a trip, which again, we've been over. So this is really just to spark some interest. And you guys, again, let us know if you've got questions. You can use the Q&A if you want to ask kind of a formal question that you want answered, or feel free to just type it down there in the chat. If you guys got a question, and I can field that right to our panelists live. So again, thanks so much for being here. One thing I do want to say is, again, there's a lot that goes into backcountry travel, from having the right gear, knowing how to use it, having the right level of avalanche education, the skill level that it requires to be in the backcountry. There is no true beginner backcountry. There's no green runs. So we really do recommend being at least an intermediate to expert level skier or snowboarder before you ever even look into backcountry travel, right? And then obviously you need to be well versed on checking the forecast. That's both the avalanche forecast and also the weather forecast, right? And then know how to correctly plan a trip. It's not just showing up at the trailhead and going for it, right? There's a whole lot more involved. So if you have questions on any of those things, let us know, or better yet, check out the previous episodes of the Slay at Home series. We've covered all of these topics in depth. We got 2.5 hours on gear. So if you have questions on stuff like that, maybe check those episodes or just let us know. And then, while you're on trail, we really do recommend, learning those leave no trace ethics. Most of the time you're recreating, it's on public land, and we really, say recreate responsibly. It's public land. Respect all of the other users, whether they're skiers or snowboarders or snowmobilers or snowshoers, or even in the summer, right? Like, always respect other users. We're all out there to have a good time. And that guy you talk to on the skin track might become your new touring partner. So very important. And then the last kind of disclaimer I would make is, after you put in all the work of planning a trip, picking a line, maybe you have this great guidebook and you've gone out to check out a line, the snowpack, the weather, your group, those are always going to be bigger factors than your line choice, right? And you always need to assess those things while you're out there, over assuming that everything is going smoothly, right? And there's plenty of lines that I've opted out of, and it's always better to live to ride another day. So, and up there in the Northwest, NWAC is your primary source for the forecast. And, we've actually demoed Avalanche forecasting centers in the past, but if you're not familiar with NWAC, please go to their website. Please learn how to check the avalanche forecast. They are a wealth of information. So we really do recommend checking out that NWAC website when you're up there in the Pacific Northwest. Next, we'll talk about the avalanche terrain exposure scale, and I will kick it over to Matt, since this is a useful feature in all of his books. Matt, let us know what AITS is and how it can help us choose terrain for the day.
Thanks. So the Avalanche Terrain Exposure Scale was developed after a series of accidents in 2003, primarily with a school group where they were in a forest, and then they happened to be under very large, like 2,000-foot avalanche paths. And so Parks Canada and some other really bright people got together and put together a way to express like how much exposure this terrain has to avalanche paths, avalanche hazard. And they have 3 ratings, and simple is usually like forested terrain, maybe mellow slopes above tree line with no overhead hazard, slopes under 30 degrees and only capable of producing very small avalanches. And then the next step up is challenging, where you're actually encountering a single avalanche path, but you have the ability to still get out of the way, but you're going to have some exposure at some point. And these avalanche paths could produce up to a D2, which is large enough to injure or kill a person. And then the complex, kind of like Sesame Street, is brought to you by letter U and V. It's like you tend to see that terrain where you have like intersecting avalanche paths, and you really have no hope of getting out of the way of them. It's like, and so if we kind of look at the evaluator, which if we go into the next one, we can see that the whole point of the scale is to tie it to the avalanche hazard and allow you to choose terrain that's appropriate for the day. And so, what the goal of this, and this is not just Avalanche Canada anymore, this system has been adopted by Norway, there are certain parts of the Pyrenees in Spain, Germany, New Zealand, and also Beacon Guidebooks has adopted it, and the Canadians have really appreciated us taking the 8 scale with us. And so by doing that, we're kind of communicating that, when you have simple terrain, when you're dealing with the hazard, which is your first thing, you go to the avalanche forecast and you're like, oh, today's low, it's like, it's a pretty mellow day. You can go into big terrain, you can tee off on what you've been waiting for all season. You're only dealing with very small isolated pockets of unstable snow. So your caution, while still they're recommending caution, because if you're going to complex terrain, chances are it's big. And so like a fall could hurt or kill you. But then like when you look at like moderate and moderate still means that we can get into avalanche terrain, but we still have specific terrain features we got to focus on. So that extra caution and complex is still warranted. And this is above tree line terrain typically. So it's like you're getting into really big slopes, big long runs, couloirs, big bowls. So you still have to pay attention to normal protocols. Now, when you get to considerable, that's where this system kind of really jumps out at you, because considerable is where you have a distribution issue with your avalanche problem. You might have small avalanches in a large portion of the terrain, but you have big avalanches in a few specific spots, and then isolated spots may be very large. And so how do you determine that? And the thing is, you can reduce your exposure to the general avalanche hazard by seeking out simple or challenging terrain with small features. And so by having that rating, it adjusts your terrain choice to meet the avalanche hazard. And obviously in high, that means that avalanches are certain, and so the thing is, it allows us to determine that, yeah, let's go to simple terrain. And we should be careful because, if there's, we need to make sure we're maintaining a buffer, but that terrain itself should be a buffer for most of the avalanche hazard. And in North America, when it's extreme, you should go bowling, play with your kids, go see a movie, but basically, chances are your highways are closed at that point anyway. So, the whole point of this is that when you read the forecast, you're like, oh, what kind of terrain should I look for? And when terrain is rated, and, Utah even adopted this system in their avalanche center. And so the idea is that, if you're looking for the terrain and that some terrain is rated, you can start to recognize what terrain matches the forecast rather than just choose what you want to do. So that's the connection, and hopefully that'll help you see how to use it in the future.
Killer. Thanks, Matt. I'll kind of kick it over to Jere here. We're going to kind of get into the meat of the talk tonight, what you guys have all tuned in for. And, here's a beautiful picture of some Baker backcountry to get your appetite whet. Jere, I'll kick it over to you here, buddy, since this is your neck of the woods.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben, for the intro, and thanks, Matt, for the intro and all that too. Yeah, this might be a familiar site for a lot of you guys. This is the home turf, but it's kind of fired off, as opposed to other regions in the country where big commerce-fed interstates and state highways weave a network of access to Forest Service roads and a massive mountain area. The Washington Cascades were remote, rugged, and vast, and our roads often get snowed in or closed due to landslides or erosion from floods. And so that only leaves us with a couple options. That's either hoof it from well below tree line, deep in the forest, or, drive up to one of our dead end roads, leaving the evergreens behind, ascending uphill as the snowbanks grow along the road to meters overhead. Here is where the magic happens. And that's where our access and snow is. Rain. This is where our rain is. So in our talk, we'll start in the north, up in Baker, and then we'll kind of gradually work our way down. So, what hasn't already been said about Baker, with its core roots in snowboarding, embracing the legendary Baker boot packers. This was long before split boards came out, hosting one of the most iconic snowboard competitions, the legendary bank slalom, and arguably the best scenery of any ski area, at least what I've been to, here in North America. So, the scenery is awesome when it's not sucked in by clouds, but Baker continues to be a mecca for riders. So the first zone that we get to is not necessarily like a hidden secret, but I'll offer a little bit different perspective on some of this terrain. So the first one that we'll start with is Swift Creek. And Swift Creek is, probably a lot of people's introduction to backcountry in the Baker area, and rightfully so. It's a good place for intermediate skiers or riders, all the way up to advanced and maybe even expert, depending on how, easily satisfied you get. Pretty good skill level, but the terrain here is kind of like, you have trees and cut runs, and the cut runs tend to be like erosion fed terrain or gullies, and maybe a little bit of subalpine or near tree line type terrain. Wintertime, once the trees get buried and pushed over, it's definitely like the time to kind of be there. And then a couple of guidebooks, one of the guidebooks out there is Matt's book that we had a slide of a couple slides ago, and then Martin Volkin's book as well. That was written by Martin and the guides at Pro Guiding Service. It's a company I still work for, and a lot of great guides there. And the nearest town is Glacier. And I think by a lot of ski area standards, Glacier's not much of a town, but it has everything that you need, coffee shop, ski shop, pizza spot, place to get beers, and a place to rest your head. And that's about it, really. Kind of what else do you need? So we'll take a look at the aerial view of Swift Creek. And, from Matt's books, we get a pretty good perspective of this terrain. And I've got it outlined here a little bit. So if anybody's been to this area before, it'll probably make sense. But if you haven't, most likely you're going to be coming from the Heather Meadows parking lot, doing maybe a 30-minute or so skin up to Austin Pass, which is the nicely labeled there on the right-hand side. And just below Austin Pass is where the ski area boundary ends. And it's important to note that the ski area has worked with the backcountry travelers quite a bit to make sure that we all travel outside the ski area boundary, especially in that area. They do a lot of control work with explosives. There's a lot of snowmobile and groomer traffic. And so it's pretty easy to satisfy the ski area and avoid any of that dangerous avalanche terrain by just being right next to the rope line, just out of bounds. So you'll follow that up to Austin Pass, and that's where you encounter Swift Creek. And the blue line is kind of like a bench in the terrain. And for a lot of folks, I would say like right to left, it's easier to harder. So starting on the right with simple terrain, and as you work towards the left, you get into more challenging terrain. And all that stuff varies from kind of shorter, maybe 300-foot lines to up to 500 feet. So they're not gigantic, but it's a good place to kind of check out conditions, see what the snowpack's doing on that particular day, maybe sort out a new touring partner, maybe just dip your toes in to see what's going on. And as you work towards the left side, it's kind of easterly direction. The terrain gets steeper. Start seeing what the steeper terrain is like. And there you get kind of like more open trees, kind of avalanche terrain, get some gullies and terrain traps to be aware of. But some really nice berms and drifts fill in that are pretty fun to ride on. And so if you end up doing a couple lines there, it's pretty easy to continue up to Artist Point. And this is where the summer road goes, if you guys have ever gone up there in the summertime. And I want to say our last La Nina year in 2017-18, in the springtime at Artist Point, they measured the snow at about 70 feet deep. And I think they did that with radar. So that was the DOT as they got ready to plow that out. So just to kind of give you an idea of how much it can snow in that area. But yeah, if you continue up to Artist Point, trend to the left from that point. And if it's easier, hard to see, one of the next red dots is Pontoon Point. And from Pontoon, you can ride any of those fall lines all the way into Swift Creek. And there you're going to start to push 700 to 800 foot lines. And this gets to borderline complex terrain. It's challenging because you have multiple avalanche paths. They're poorly defined. But what you end up getting is more poorly defined, overlapping avalanche paths and terrain traps. So it can quickly get into complex terrain. But it's good open steep lines, good fall line, awfully playful. Again, some nice fun drifts and steeper lines. But there, again, it kind of steepens probably, 40 plus degrees. So you really want to make sure that you have moderate or low conditions if you're going to check that area out for the first time. I wouldn't really go out there during considerable avalanche conditions. I'd probably stick more towards the Austin Pass side of things where the terrain is simple, maybe in the 30-ish degree slope angle range, easy to avoid terrain traps. So, again, this is a pretty popular area, but I go to it pretty often because it offers a lot of variety. And I think a lot of people just skip some of the better spots nearby in there. So just kind of to look at it with a little bit different perspective. And so if I were to kind of like summarize this spot a little bit as like Pontoon Point and Swift Creek, it's that, it's pretty easy terrain to start the day. So I kind of mentioned that. The access is pretty easy. So you could go out there, and if the snow isn't what you want, you can turn around and go home pretty easily. If it's really busy, you can go somewhere else nearby. In addition, there's, especially in that primary area, there's little to no overhead hazard. But as you work towards the left or the east, you start introducing more overhead hazard in there. So just being cautious as you do that. And I think, as you might be able to see in the photo on this page, that the scenery is pretty incredible. Mount Shuckson's there, and the terrain kind of in the background on the left is the Shuckson Arm, and that's kind of the backside of the ski area. So it's pretty incredible, inspirational. You might end up wanting to create art at the point, maybe an artist point, perhaps. But yeah, slope angles, steep enough to slide, and potential terrain traps. So just keep in mind, sure, it's a good introductory for a lot of people. And as you step it up, there's definitely those hazards to consider. And in the end, just kind of a short approach. So yeah, that's kind of Swift Creek in summary. And do we have any questions coming up on that one, Ben, that we can address in regards to Baker and Swift Creek area?
I think you're good. Somebody was asking, what direction is north in this photo, but I believe Matt has answered them. That was to the left. Maybe just confirm that.
Yeah, totally. So that's the other great thing about this piece of terrain, is that it offers all sorts of aspects. So in the right side of the image is more southerly directions. And so you could start there in the morning. As it gets warmer and the sun gets higher in the sky, you can start to come around that bowl to the looker's left side in the image and start to get more of those northerly aspects. Similarly along those lines, there's a lot of orographic, so mountain range scale winds. And if we scaled it down a little bit to terrain or topographic scale winds, that you get a lot of ridgeline loading off Pontoon Point. And so that often is a pretty wind slabby kind of area. And so that's why I would offer a lot of caution going out there at certain times. But just to offer a little bit more perspective on the aspects there.
Perfect. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, if there's no other questions there, maybe we can move on to the next spot here. Is Stevens Pass. So for those of you that aren't in the area, Stevens Pass is just to the south of Baker. Maybe if we were to drive from one to the other, it's probably a couple hours away or so. But oftentimes, it's a pretty popular spot. So oftentimes you might find yourself in a conga line of traffic as you drive up the Stevens Pass Highway. Might not be what you had in mind, but maybe make a quick pit stop at the Espresso Chalet and shake out those hips a bit and maybe mingle with Bigfoot. I've been known to kind of roam in those areas a little bit. But be sure to get an early start. And once you get up to the pass and see the parking lot mayhem, just continue on down the road a little bit further towards the cross-country ski area and our next zone, Lanham Lakes. And Lanham Lakes, again, is like another really great area that offers something for everybody. So maybe a beginner backcountry skier, but intermediate ability up through advanced. In addition to this area, you can keep it mellow with simple terrain and work all the way up into the complex terrain. So, that's below tree line, near tree line, and alpine terrain, thinking about it from the Avalanche perspective. Again, winter season is the time to do it. And again, Martin Volkin's book and the Guides of Pro Guiding Service have pieced this one together as well. And it's worth plugging that there will be a book coming out soon for that. And then the nearest town to there is Leavenworth, just a really nice little mountain town down on the east side. Has all the amenities that you need to have a good time up in the mountain. So nice thing about Lanham Lakes approach is that you can, one of the big reasons that we kind of chose this, there's a lot of great spots at Stevens Pass, but one of the big reasons that we chose Lanham Lakes is not just the diversity of terrain, but as use has increased in this area, so has the challenges of parking. And so again, compared to a lot of the bigger ski areas around the country, we're really limited on the space that we can put parking. I mean, the mountains they're really steep. And there's not a lot of places to build parking garages and parking decks or level terrain. And so this is one of the challenges that Stevens Pass has run into as they've grown in popularity is parking. And so we're offering this up as an alternative down the road to kind of spread out the parking a little bit more. But similar to what Ben mentioned earlier about different users, this is a cross-country area that offers groomed trails. And so that's such a nice thing to offer to people. We want to give them respect and distance when we can, not just in a COVID era, but just understand that that's kind of like their place to play. And we may be using some of the cross-country parking and groomer trails to kind of egress from that, but just give them space, think about leaving it kind of nicer than what you found it. And so, as you work, if you check it out in the guidebook when it comes out or on a topo map, you're going to find yourself at the cross-country ski area parking. You're going to head up Lanham Creek. And the nice thing is low in the valley, you can kind of dip your toes in again at the mouth of the valley, find some nice mellow trees to check out. You might start with some 700 or 800 foot runs, and then you can work up from there. You can get up to about 5,200 feet on the ridge lines that are to the east and west of the creek. But as you go up, you'll start encountering different avalanche problems and different snowpacks. So just something to keep in mind. And so you can stay pretty well protected low in the valley, climb up towards one of the ridge lines. And if you want to keep it simple for the day, it's pretty easy to head back out to where you parked. Maybe as you gain experience in this area and you decide to go out during low or maybe even moderate avalanche conditions with good visibility, that you would work up the valley towards the head of the valley where Jim Hill is. And there's just steeper terrain. It becomes more open. You're going to start working into challenging terrain and eventually that complex terrain. So make sure that you have the conditions that lend itself to having a good, fun, safe experience as you kind of explore this area. To kind of add on to this, off the topic from Swift Creek, is that you have a variety of aspects, different ridges and different ways to ride. And so if you don't find good snow in one spot, you might be able to find a different aspect on the other side of the valley. Wind scoured on one side, wind drifted on the other, sun exposed in one area, sheltered on another. And I think what's really cool about this spot is if you really plan it right, you don't have to take the valley all the way out. So as snowboarders, we kind of are looking for that easy egress instead of pulling down the valley or something like that. You can gain the ridge lines and basically ski fall line right back to your car. So kind of a really cool consideration here, because what you'll find as we go through the discussion about some of the other areas is sometimes we have these long valleys that lead into the terrain. So you actually have to travel a mile and a half up these relatively flat valleys until you get to the bottom of the fall line skiing. And what that means at the end of the day is maybe you're poling as a split boarder, one footing, doing short boot packs just to get back into the fall line and descending, where skiers don't often think about these things. So, in places like this, you can gain the ridge, ski back down to your car, and maybe keep those poles on your pack for that last ride out at the end of the day. I know Matt and Kiira have a bunch of experience in this area. If you guys have anything you want to add to it, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I think that you cover that area really well. There's a couple different areas up at the top of the pass as well. And I know this year with COVID and Vail, there are some parking issues if you go up to the very top, which would be Skyline. That's a great place to access a lot of terrain if you catch it midweek. You can usually get parking and avoid any issues there. There's also, since they're doing reservation systems up at Stevens Pass, the resort, the Yodelin lot, which is just over the pass, your first lot off to the right, is another area to check out. Again, that has a variety of terrain and a variety of slope aspects. So it's definitely worth checking out a little bit closer.
I do know that there's claimed secret stashes if you treat that area like a clock and work your way towards the road. There might be some magic trees for you. Just a rumor, but I thought I'd pass that along.
Yeah, how can you resist magic trees?
Seriously, it's like I'm drawn like a moth to a flame.
Right. Yeah, nice. Stevens Pass, like a lot of these areas is pretty well regarded and has that cult following. So, digging in a little bit, you guys will be rewarded. So, yeah, we'll move on to the next area and we'll kind of hand it over to Matt here.
So Hurricane Ridge is, for many of us, we're like, wow, who would go out to the peninsula for skiing? The strange thing about snow is it doesn't know that it's on the coast. And so when you go to the Olympics, they basically rise right out of the ocean to like 7,000 feet. And Hurricane Ridge was built to get people up to the Alpine. So it's a 17-mile road that goes up to almost 5,200 feet. And in the meantime, they basically moved a ski area from a place called Deer Park, which actually in the 30s was one of the best ski areas in Washington, to Hurricane Ridge in the late 50s, early 60s. And the strange thing about Hurricane Ridge is that there's basically runs for everybody. And if you are concerned about traversing, you want to go to Hurricane Ridge because all the runs basically run from the road, from the ridge to the road. So you basically bottom out, walk back to your car, or skin back up and do it again. And so the great thing too is that the elevation is quite high. You basically start over 4,000 feet, and Jere mentioned incredible views. When you're on the ridge up there, you can see Canada, you can see the Coast Range, you can see Baker, you can see Mount Olympus and the rest of the Olympics for that matter. And so, in terms of views, when you have a Bluebird day up there, it is a sea to sky affair. So it's really, really spectacular. And I got to work out there for 6 seasons for Northwest Avalanche Center as an observer, and basically got a license to explore. And I was excited to do it. In terms of driving, I know Jere is a fan of Baker, but if you live in Seattle, Hurricane Ridge is really just about the same drive, and you get a ferry ride. The road is only open Friday through Sunday, except during holidays, they'll be open for like the duration, like Christmas through New Year's. And being a national park, you need a Golden Eagle pass or pay the park fee. And just a specific thing for Rainier and Hurricane Ridge, since they're both the national park system, carry chains, even if they don't fit your car. You need chains and you need to prove you have them. They're pretty stiff on that one. And they can only bring 200 cars up to Hurricane Ridge. So it's never going to be crowded because more than half those cars are people sledding and snowshoeing. And if you're ski touring, you're pretty much guaranteed fresh tracks. And for those concerned, is the snow good? Just remember, this place is higher than Stevens or Baker, and it gets its freshies first. So it's coming right off the ocean, right at you. It lives up to its name. I've seen wind slabs develop within the hour or two that I left my car. So the winds can be pretty stiff up there. But the key thing about Hurricane Ridge is that you get this amazing vertical. And if we kind of look at the next slide for some of the options. So what we were looking at before was the backside of Mount Angeles, which is the crown jewel of this roadside access. But what you're looking at here is basically from right to left is the shoulder of Mount Angeles over to where the edge of the ski area. And there is this little ski area. Glenn Plake actually visited this place, you know, the little areas that rock. And I mean, it's a pommel lift and a rope tow, and you don't need to use them because, you know, basically you can skin up from the parking, one of the pullouts for this area called Maggie's. It's about a 700-foot climb. There's no hazard on it. You can, if you follow the track, it takes you to the ridge. And we're only showing the south aspects. And so, you know, you notice there are trees, but you can see a lot of white there, and it gets enough snow that the glade skiing is spectacular. And, you know, a zone like Maggie's is popular, means you're going to see like 10 other riders there. It's pretty chill, you know, and there's a number of lines going through. And as you go from Maggie's, which is over on the left side, you know, there's a number of glades that you can pop through, some bowls. And then the top where number 5 is actually this thing called 20th of June. It's this really spectacular slide path that actually is really fun to ride when it's not sliding. And it goes right down to the road. So you can just repeat, you know, it's like your favorite song on a digital player. You just put it on repeat on Spotify and you get to hear it like 17 times while you're working, and you just cycle through this thing. The backside is equally as good, but you know, I think in the theme, you know, what we're looking at in this slide is entirely like, it's a range of simple to challenging terrain. So you can avoid avalanche hazard if you want to. And as you go from the number 9, which is what we call Kingdom, and then over to 10, which is Silver Fir, those areas have some really fun steep trees. And then just hinting at you is Mount Angeles. And Mount Angeles from the road is 2,000 feet. And I've talked to some people who guide across the Cascades. And when I tell them that there's a 2,000-foot run that drops you right at your car, they're really concerned. They get nervous. Their palms get sweaty because I tell them it's in the Olympics, and they're like, shut the front door. But it's true. And, you know, so, you know, sometimes truth hurts. And the Olympics definitely have been overlooked by a lot of people. And the best part about that thing is, like, there's only 200 cars. So Vail can't shut you down. Altera can't mess your parking up. But you do have to abide by the Rangers rules. You know, they do want you out of there at a certain time. You can park overnight. Some of the classic traverses around there, they're amazing. They're non-glaciated. But yeah, I mean, I think the concern can be sometimes wind can shut the place down. I mean, the winds get over 50 miles an hour and can drift in the road in a matter of a few hours. Their Twitter feed, and this is true for Mount Rainier as well, and all passes. You know, if you get their Twitter feed, they're really good at telling you whether the road is open or closed. But there are a lot of dedicated locals. So Friday through Sunday, when you punch your ticket to go out there, you know, get on the ferry at 7 a.m. Out of Edmonds. You know, you could stop at the PCC, get some coffee and some food if you want some like comfortable breakfast biscuits and bacon or nice baked goods. Get on the ferry, and it's from the ferry to the road is a little over an hour and 15 minutes. And then, you know, now, you know, there's a lot of good little bistros on the way down, you know, and depending on your choice of après, there's a number of fun things to do over there, or spend the night and do it again the next day. But yeah, it's like, and the visitor center it's cool. It's like there's a lot of history, just like Stevens Pass, so it's good to soak it in. And then if you manage to nail a bluebird day, make sure you have room on your camera, because the photos are just epic. You know, being able to look down at the ocean while you're shredding POW.
So Matt, we got a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
So one, you mentioned Deer Park. Do you know if that road is open?
No, that road is closed. Typically if you're kind of a local angling to hit it, if there's dry road, you can ride a bike, but it gets gated sometime late fall or early winter once the snow starts falling.
Perfect. And then the other question we have is, does the 200 car limit fill up quickly on weekends?
Yes, it can. People on a powder day, you can see cars like 20 or 30 deep by like 8:30. Not every weekend is like that, but certainly holiday weekends, you tend to see big crowds.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then I think I saw there's a multi-day trip. Is there a way to ferry without 2 cars? That would be hard. Deer Park is not that far by driving, but it would be hard not to do it. Basically you have to. The challenge with doing overnights in the park is that there's a specific parking lot, and it's not right at the parking lot that you would do some of your overnight traverses in. So that is a logistical hurdle that is a little hard to overcome. But if you ride up there, you might actually get to know somebody who would help you out. Because basically you'd want to leave your car at Deer Park, which is in Sequim, and it's approximately like a 45-minute drive or so around from Hurricane Ridge Road. But that's all I have on that.
All right. Thanks for that, Matt. Rundown on the Olympics. Yeah, super sweet spot. I've only been out there once, but definitely look forward to going out there more often. Pretty iconic for the Cascades. But what we'll get into next is probably what a lot of people are familiar with is Snoqualmie Pass. And I think it's so familiar for so many people that they overlook it and try to go other places. But this is probably where I've spent the second most amount of time here in Washington. And I've definitely have grown to like it quite a bit. Definitely have to be a little gritty like most skiers here in the Cascades, but it has kind of what you're looking for. So like for many Sounders, which is what they call people around the Seattle area, Snoqualmie Pass was like the foundation of their shreducation. So ski clubs would send their kids from school to the hill and back to their parents at the end of the day. So like imagine bag lunches and steamy bus windows and like uber wet gear for the ride home. Even so, the terrain, snow, and access are the epitome of Cascadian ski experiences. Besides access at about 40 minutes from Seattle, this powder house delivers like ample snow, steep terrain, and easy enough access to do like before work laps, or maybe you cut out from lunch early and kind of get some afternoon laps. So the main area that we'll be talking about mostly here is around Kendall. And again, we kind of chose this area because it offers a huge variety of terrain, from kind of first time tours, maybe on like a lower moderate day, all the way up to the gnarliest of gnarly bros and girls and ladies that like to shred. So lot of treed terrain here, but all the way up to near and above tree line alpine style terrain. So again, winter season, kind of the time to do it. Most places in the Cascades are into the springtime. But Matt's book is excellent for the area. It's really well documented there. And then Martin and the Guides of Pro Guiding Service put together another fantastic book, North Bend being your town to go to there. So in this next image, we get a good view of Kendall Stump and Kendall Lakes and Kendall Mountain. And I kind of annotated the Commonwealth approach, which is pretty popular for a lot of people. And Matt may be able to elaborate a little bit, but I always have a hard distinction of what is Kendall trees versus what's not Kendall trees. But what I'll say is that the blue line is pretty popular access for a lot of people, and the Commonwealth is another one of those approaches that's kind of meandering, kind of lowish angle. And for split borders, it's not too bad, but it's probably easier than the Alpental Valley approach, anybody who's familiar with that. But little poling, maybe one footing, a little booting, but awfully protected area, really nice. And once you become familiar with the Commonwealth Valley approach there in the blue line, you can start dabbling in some of the more challenging terrain above. But even from the Commonwealth approach, you can still start to access some of the burlier terrain we'll talk about kind of at the end of this section. On the right side, you'll see Kendall Knob, or the Knob approach. And as a snowboarder, this is probably what I've leaned to the most when I've traveled in this area. And the reason for that is it's fairly direct fall line, and you're ascending about 1,800 vertical feet from the trailhead. So if you do the Kendall Knob approach, the skinning's not necessarily that easy because there's a variety of slope angles and there's some fairly tight trees in spots. So thinking kick turns, maybe steeper terrain to side hill on. So it can be challenging skinning conditions, but you won't have the long valley to come out on like on Commonwealth. So the Kendall Knob area along with Kendall Lakes, this is fairly simple terrain, although it does have terrain steep enough to slide, and terrain traps as well. But really, really beautiful area. And as you kind of grow through these two zones, kind of accessing the Commonwealth approach and the Kendall Knob or the Kendall Stump approach, then you can start dabbling in the adventure zone, where it gets pretty burly, pretty fast. But again, I think the idea here is that, Kendall Mountain has some really nice bigger slopes above, as you guys can see in the above tree line area. But I think during Snowmageddon a couple years ago, that would have been for us, February 2018 or 19. And even this year, there was some imagery of that whole face sliding wall to wall, kind of reminiscent of some persistent slabs. And I think in at least one case, we did end up having a persistent slab problem around that time. But it just slides big, as evident in that big slide path kind of to the right of the Commonwealth approach. So, choosing the right time to go beyond these treat areas, I think navigating is a big thing to consider here as well. While the Commonwealth Valley approach is, it's not trivial. There definitely are, it's not super challenging either. There's just a couple key areas to make sure you don't travel underneath some overhead hazard. Whereas the Kendall Trees approach, just more trees, but steep enough. So, Matt, you have anything that you want to add to kind of like this side of things, some of your personal experiences at all?
Yeah, I would just say that, the thing about Commonwealth approach is, while it's more popular, you're also going to encounter snowshoers, dog walkers, and overnight campers. It's a bit of a highway, and the nice thing about the Kendall Knob approach is that you can actually, if you're coming up and dropping over the ridge, and Kendall Knob is Kendall Trees, and then over on the left where the blue line is, that's Big Trees, and that tended to be a contentious debate amongst some crusty old people. So, when you're looking at that, the nice thing about the lakes is that it has a really good variety of glade skiing to complement the really sheltered trees off the knob into there. And just a small historical footnote, it's like that slide path actually was from 1990. It was a 17-day, 17-foot storm with a rain on snow event. And just for perspective, the bottom of that slope's only like 11 degrees. It's pretty mellow. So it was a pretty spectacular, but like 1 in 500-year event. So it created a really spectacular ski run, but I agree with everything you say in terms of, other than the tight trees, the Kendall stump knob approach offers a little more solitude and a little more versatility.
Awesome. We have a few questions about this area too. The first question is from Nathan Keeley, and he's asking if the Commonwealth approach follows the Commonwealth Creek.
Yeah, I believe
Yes.
that's true. Yep.
Sweet.
Yeah,
And then go for it, Matt.
No, I was just going to agree. Sorry.
You're good. And then the next one is just asking about avalanche danger in the Kendall trees, and if it stays fairly sheltered, or if there are slide areas that are known to us.
I can speak to the exposure. I mean, the exposure in the Kendall trees, so off that treed ridge, is really limited to very small D1s. There's no overhead exposure. If you drop over into Kendall Lakes, you can see some open slopes, and that definitely has more exposure. And the big tree side where the text of Commonwealth approaches, essentially, if you go to the edge of the trees where that slide path is, you're no longer sheltered. So the shelter is actually pretty well, it's pretty well sheltered once you're like within 50 to 100 feet into the old growth section. There's not room for large avalanches to happen there, but the temptation to get out of the trees is pretty high. So if you're suffering from temptation, then you have to watch yourself on the boundary of those trees, because those slopes are pretty alluring.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
To keep it going here. Thanks for that, you guys. Thanks for the questions. I think, if we go to the Kendall Adventure Zone, that thing to keep in mind that this is just pretty burly terrain. It's pretty tricky to know exactly which line you're on, and it's just kind of a teaser to let you guys know that if you put in the effort, to find your way around that place, that maybe that's waiting for you. And we would always advocate for hiring one of us or hiring a guide, because we just know the terrain. We know how to get in and out of it. Risk management and assessment is kind of what we do. And while, sure, at times you might be able to do it on your own, I feel like we often deliver pretty like a consistently fun day without a lot of hangups. So just something to keep in mind with the little teaser there of the Kendall Adventure line, because additionally getting out of there is not always very easy, depending on what you decide to do. Just so to kind of summarize these areas, Kendall Stump and Lakes, good area to kind of explore and get familiar with. You can keep it simple as far as the 8 scale goes, all the way up to that complex terrain. So just a lot of terrain to explore there. And yeah, I think we discussed a lot of those other bullet points fairly well. So maybe we can keep on moving.
Jerry, we had a quick question on the Adventure Zone, and Remy asked, how do you get back from the Adventure Zone? He was asking about Gold Creek, and asking, if he could pull a sled up and get a base camp going there at the base. So what's the best way to get in and out of that area?
Yeah, maybe Matt can take on this one a little bit, but I have heard Gold Creek can be pretty scrappy to get in and out of, but let Matt elaborate on that one.
Yeah, if we just skip back to the other slide real quick. So if you divide the Adventure Zone sort of from right to left, that kind of big gentle kind of slope on the right side, you access you actually access from the end of Commonwealth, and then the kind of the first two lines you pretty much still access from Commonwealth coming up like the swath that we saw, but all the rest of those are sort of out of the Kendall Lakes area. And with the exception of a route that's not even really visible, which is the Kendall Gold line, that drops directly to Gold Creek, almost all of these we boot back up because the art of suffering was born in Gold Creek, and it was exported. So yeah, you rarely walk on the ground in certain parts of it. So yeah, I mean there is a way through, but I got to partake in exploring a number of these, and we almost exclusively booted back because we did one trip down Gold Creek, and that was all we needed. So
Perfect.
So I think this is the bonus round for Snoqualmie Pass. This zone is kind of it's out of Hyack. And in the theme of keeping things in the simple terrain and having like an alternative to some heavier trafficked areas. Roaring Ridge, from the lowest point in the left-hand part of the photo to the highest point is about a little over 2,600 feet, and so there's a lot of room to roam here, and actually for the first 2,000, almost 2,000 feet, you can ride in simple terrain with limited exposure to big avalanche paths. And there's a couple of easy ways to get to there. You do end up using the John Wayne Iron Horse Trail to gain access to it. So you kind of skinning it out, but unlike valleys that are really schwacky, you're on a groomed Nordic trail. So as someone who might not be comfortable like with heavy vegetation, this is an ideal place. And it's also got a lot of really beautiful old growth glades, even though it looks like it's been logged. I've been going there for almost 12 years or 8 years now. And one of the things about that spot is like, just when I thought I was going to have to do some logging myself, they started doing it for me. And they've been kind of selectively logging some of the lower glades. So it's been improving every year. So for that, I would just say that it's worth exploring if you want some space and some fresh tracks. Crystal. So yeah, there's a lot of argument which is the best ski area, and I've got to work in Le Grave in France, and I've skied in Asia, and I've managed to ski off of Vincent, and Crystal actually still sits in a special place in my heart. And so there's a couple of zones that are like Crystal has, first of all, their boundary has exits. So there's like 7 exits that you can exit directly from the chairs. Some require a little traversing. And then, and then the thing is, it's like you have a lot of open terrain. So you do need to be an intermediate to expert, just because it's bigger terrain than you think. So, you want to be comfortable riding out there. And the surprising thing is that since the elevation is so significant, you can be up to 7,000 feet when you ride off the King and Southback, but the ridge lines are all in the mid to high 6,000 foot range. And one of the things that is surprising is it's really got really good snow. Like Baker gets a lot of snow, but Crystal actually gets a lot of powder. So that's one of the ideal parts of it. And I did put a lot of my energy into a book there, and some of the really nice lines that are outside the boundary in the Rainier National Park and in the Forest Service nearby are also in Martin Volkin's book. Town-wise, Greenwater, it's funky. but they do have some fun little spots to grab a beer on the way down. And Enumclaw is actually a fun spot. They've got some really good bistros and pizza places. And so, and then if you're a motor enthusiast, you know, there's some good snowmobile spots nearby as well. And some of the zones that we have on tap to share with you are places that probably are just outside of like the Bullion Basin, which is the most accessible. So the next zone we want to look at would be this is on the other side of Bullion Basin. So for people who have been to Crystal, there's two bowls that you can see when you look up from the ski area. And so on the upper right hand side is actually the top of something called Bullion Peak, and then Crown Points to the right. And this is Morse Creek. So this is actually technically sort of to the southeast of the base area. But you notice that there's big open slopes, and these aren't actually that steep. You know, they're in the mid to upper 30s. And so for people that just have gone to Bullion Basin a bunch of times, may have gone to East Peak, and these are incredibly fun, popular tours. This is just something that, you know, you're often intimidated because you've hiked like 2.5 hours and you're like, I don't know what's on the other side. And this is what awaits you. And so you do have to climb out what you ride. And this is mostly, I would say, challenging terrain. You know, there's definitely open slopes. And you know, with Crystal, you do have to read the snowpack report carefully because this place does bury surface hoar and can develop facets because of its elevation. You know, all these ridges are somewhere around 65 to 6,800. But each one of these runs is essentially like, you know, lightly graded slopes. And the real, you can tell at the bottom that it gets kind of densely treed, but you know, you can pull up at any time because these are long runs. And, you know, they're along that ridge from the right side, you go from Crown Point and you come back over to Pick Handle. And so the nice thing is, like, you know, it doesn't matter what tool you're on. This is mostly gravity. The one thing to bear in mind, if you exit out Bear Gap, that's not friendly for snowboards at all. You know, it's a lot of sidestepping for a skier, and it's a lot of booting for a snowboarder. So yeah, I mean, right now, like you know, if I was to suggest something, it's like riding out a Pick Handle can be quite good. You have to get, the line is a little finicky, but there is a line that goes in and out of there, and then riding out back down Bullion is pretty relaxed. And the nice thing about these is that if you hit them on the right day, you know, if you drop over this side and then come back the other side, you know, that's possibly a 3,500 to 4,000 foot day of riding in the backcountry. The other thing is, like, if you're an Icon pass holder, you can ride south back, you know, end up at Bear Gap, and then pop over and, you know, hike up to Bear Gap, drop over, and just kind of like almost do like a W. So this is a school zone, but there's another zone that I want to share that actually is not even from the parking lot. So what we're looking at, we're looking south. So these are all like kind of north facing shots. This is what is actually on the map is Goat Lake, and just beyond the little red numbered spots is Norse Peak. And so if you know where Norse Peak Trailhead is, it's 2 miles from the parking area. And when you drive up to Crystal, you see this little pullout. It's groomed. There might be 1 or 2 cars. Some people that look like they should know what they're doing might be there, because this place doesn't get much traffic. And in fact, it can only park about 8 or 9 cars total. So you're destined to not meet a lot of people. But the key thing is this: you can follow the Norse Peak Trail and skin up to this ridge, and like on the lower right hand side, that gladed area known as Charlotte's Trees is actually a really fun glade that it's easy access, and you can stay in simple and just some moderate challenging terrain, small open slopes. But then you can go big. You can keep working up the ridge, and there's all those chutes. And then on the far left, that's a long gladed run as well. And especially in later in February and March, when you have longer days, it's really nice, because if you've ever been up Bullion, it takes about two to 3 hours to get to East Peak. This is slightly more direct, but you'll have maybe 20 people. It's a lot of area, and it's easy to do laps once you get a skin track in. And so, I think it's over by the goat trees is where you can put a line, your skin track back in. They'll connect you back to the ridge. So this is a cool spot. It doesn't require advanced riding ability, because there's a lot of moderate angle terrain there, but it does, you do have to be pretty spot on your snowpack. So, because you don't have the benefit of being near the ski area, so it has a more remote feel. And then there was a question about Bullion, and Bullion was just out of view in the other photo. So if you look at sort of the farthest right red dot, that's just a Crown Point south face. Bullion would be if you were to walk up to that top of Crown Point and drop over the other side, that would be Bullion Basin, and that would take you down. It would connect back up with the roads just above where the ski school is, and you come out, there's snowmobiles parked at the bottom of it. So it's not a ski run. You wouldn't accidentally end up there unless you knew that you're going there from the Gold Hills, Jere. But yeah, so those are definitely some nice spots to spread your use out and explore new zones. And they're as challenging as you want them to be, because you can definitely keep the challenge to a much more moderate level.
Not Rainier. Woo, that's my home turf. Okay, so Mount Rainier, as everyone is probably familiar with, is a glaciated mountain, but there is a lot of terrain that is non-glaciated and awesome to ride. Anywhere from the middle of the winter all the way up into the summer. So if you are a turns all year kind of person, this is your place. There's lots of stuff right out of Paradise, and that's where I'm going to talk about first. So Paradise is one of the main visitor centers. Again, you can check the road conditions through the National Park Twitter account. They open a gate at Longmire, and they're going to be reporting on times for that when that road will be cleared. But you'll go up to Paradise, and out of Paradise, it's just like easy candy. There's a lot of great riding like right in that basin. You can go also over to Edith Creek and Golden Gate, and you're going to get short laps there, tree runs, beautiful scenery, great terrain. Anything that's like, just starting off, you're going to see a lot of snowshoers, people pulling sleds, a lot of people just coming to see the snow. And the further you work out to the Looker's right-hand side, into that Edith Creek, Golden Gate area, the further away from people you're going to get. Again, those are like pretty short runs. I like that area, especially on like higher avalanche danger days. It's easy to find terrain that isn't exposed to any overhead hazard and is pretty low angle. Continuing up, you can go up the Muir Snowfield. A lot of people like to go up to Camp Muir itself. It's a fun place to do an overnight if you're into snow camping. And that you're kind of looking at a lot of really mellow terrain, a long day for sure. It's almost 5,000 feet of elevation gain, so a great ride down, but a lot of uphill walking. And with that, there is one area of concern, which is Panorama Point. Usually there's a skin track that's put in. That's like the steepest section of the whole snowfield. There's a skin track that's put in, or a lot of people boot it depending on conditions. So again, be watching that avalanche report to see what's going on with the snow conditions. But once you're up there, I really recommend putting in a track. It's all above tree line, so complete alpine environment. And if you were to get caught in a storm, there's a double fall line, which means basically that as you're going down the slope, you have another angle off to the edge, which will drop you onto the Nisqually Glacier. So having a track in and kind of knowing where you're going is really important for that one. So that's like kind of getting into that intermediate to expert like terrain navigation and choice. But again, the riding there is like pretty simple and straightforward if you get a bluebird day or have a good track in. Also on the Muir Snowfield, you can kind of step it up with the Nisqually Chute. And that is very much avalanche dependent. I only look there on moderate to low days and depending on what that forecast looks like. But there's like some great options just off of the snowfield and in that Paradise Basin to go look at. We also put in here the Tatoosh Range, which a lot of people see because if you're up there, you can see it, but it's not a place that a ton of people go to first. And I love the Tatoosh Range. I think it's great. You get away from a lot of the people that are up at Paradise and it's really easy to access. The road is closed, but you can park and skin on it, which makes it wonderful. And it's not bad coming down on either. But here you can start to like explore more of those advanced runs. There's a couple couloirs that you can check out on Lane Peak that I really like. And then you can actually do an entire traverse conditions dependent. And this is also a popular place to do some of that snow camping and get a little bit more of the expedition style riding down if you're interested in doing that. The closest towns are Ashford and Elby. I really like in Ashford, there is this place called Paradise Village that has a great bakery with excellent pierogies. So after a long day up in the sun in the alpine environment, it's kind of fun to like go and get some like delicious pierogies. And then down in Elby, there's a bar and grill that is awesome to just go hang out at. And there's great outdoor seating right now. Matt and Jere, you have more to add?
No, that was amazing. That was awesome. Yeah. Nope, that sounded great to me.
We had someone asking, where is Lane Peak in this photo?
Lane Peak is all the way to the right, if I'm not mistaken. Matt, this is one of your photos. And when there's more snow in there, those trees at the bottom in this avalanche path get covered up. And again, that is like super conditions dependent.
Yeah, this photo was taken in like mid to late April. But yeah, I've ridden it too, and it is really a special place. And yeah, I'm gonna go find those pierogies now that you said that.
Yeah, just opened a couple years ago. It's a great family that owns it. Love it.
Well, awesome, guys. Kiira, let us know if you have anything left in the Q&A that we need to address. And if you guys have any more questions, for these guys, let us know here in the chat and we can answer them. Otherwise, Jere, Kiira, maybe take a look at that Q&A and see if there's anything else that you guys want to address here. Yeah, what's the name of the pierogi place? I think we're all wondering that. So maybe figure that out and let us know. But quickly, guys, if you want to pick up any of Matt's books, they are available here on Beacon Guidebooks. I really love all the different formats that these books are offered in. They come in a really nice, small, compact, form, so you can carry them with you. They're not like your traditional guidebooks that maybe are a little too heavy. I kind of came up taking photos of guidebooks a lot of times to take with me. And the neat thing about these Beacon books is you can really take them with you in your pack. So they're really, really handy. They also put out a series of maps. And so you'll have, all the information in this book on a map. So you'll have, the big map, and then on the back, we'll have all the different line choices. So really a bunch of cool options from these guys at Beacon. And then Rack Up. these books are downloadable, which is really, really cool. Rackup is a really cool app that you can download on your phone for free. And then you just buy the books that you want. And the cool thing is that they'll have these, really intricate photos with the lines, all the information on those lines. And then it even can track you just like you would use Gaia or CalTopo in the field to kind of make sure that you're on the correct path as you're heading up to your line of choice. So really cool app, really cool guidebooks. Definitely check those out. And then, yeah, just let us know if you have any questions here. We'll quickly run through the questions here and then say our goodbyes here. So definitely let us know if you got any last minute questions here, but we are quickly approaching our 7:30 time limit. So get those questions in.
There are a few questions. One was for you, Matt, about a Plan B area if the 200 parking spot limit fills up at Hurricane Ridge. I don't know if you have anything off the top of your head.
Yeah, that is a little tricky. The place, Eleanor isn't really that close. You can actually hike up to Deer Park. It's not an incredibly long road that you can't do, and Deer Park is directly accessed from the road. So, you just kind of make sure you Google map where that road is, because you turn off the 101 and drive from there. But yeah, that I would definitely just get on the Twitter feed for that, because I find when I worked out there, I drove up at I got to the toll booth at 6:40, 6:50, and got on the 7 o'clock ferry, and you just need to check the schedule and figure out what that timing is. But that usually got you there at 8:45 to the gate from Seattle. And if you're early, that's fine. It's rare. I mean, it might be a powder day or a holiday that you might get smoked, but it's just if you show up there around 9:30, 10, that's when you might be pushing your luck.
Awesome. And then I think the last big question for us is our favorite line or some guidebook recommendations down in Oregon.
The only guidebook I know that's still in print is the Mountaineers one for the volcanoes primarily. I've been working with Mountain Savvy, and so it's a lot of online material for Mount Hood. But yeah, I think there's a David Ray book or I forget what it is. He had a good one too for that covered Mount Hood really well. So yeah, that's a tough one.
And I guess my favorite line that I've had down there is the Southwest Chutes on Mount Adams in the spring. It's great fun.
Yeah, that's an excellent line. I was just going to say my new zone to explore is the Van Trump Comet Falls zone on Rainier.
Yeah, that's a great zone.
Yeah, it's really sweet fall lines, and you can get all the way up to just under 11,000 feet on that turtle snowfield.
Mm-hmm. And it's not crowded at all. You miss all of the crowds and avoid parking issues for sure.
Yeah, hiking out on that trail is pretty chill. There is a little avalanche hazard right before the falls, but yeah, that's a spectacular zone.
Kiira, it looks like we got a few more questions rolling in the Q&A. If you wouldn't mind fielding those to us real quick.
Yeah, no problem. Any good places that you know of at the south end of Goat Rocks near Rainier? Nathan is looking for some shorter drive times from Hood River. I don't know much about the Goat Rocks area. I know that there is great skiing out there, but I haven't been in that area to explore it myself yet.
Oh,
yeah, me neither. I think Matt could field that one.
I mean, the thing I know, the only thing I really know since I haven't been there in years is that Right now, the whatchamacallit, the White Pass built a chair so you can basically drop in the goat rocks off the backside of their, I don't know the name of the chair because I haven't been there since they built it, but you can actually do like day tours down into that zone. But most of my friends would usually go in the spring and have a good time. I did see that there was a question about, can you approach using the North Peak Trail? And if this is for Goat Lake, yes. It is that pull out that they plow, and you can see a yellow gate closing the road. You know you're in the right place. And just one thing about parking is, despite COVID, just try to maximize space there, and not for yourself, but for everyone else. You can fit about 8 cars if people park well.
Awesome. Kiira, we got any more questions here that we want to get through? You guys let us know if you got any last minute questions. Otherwise, panelists, let these guys know where they can reach you. If they have any more questions, feel free to leave your information there in the chat, or just as we answer these last minute questions here, feel free to let them know where to reach out to you.
Awesome. Yeah, we're all caught up in the Q&A.
Well, awesome, gang. If you have any questions for us here at Weston, you can always hit us up at info@Weston Backcountry. We've got guides all over the US, Canada. We've even got some crew over in Japan and Europe. So we're always happy to answer questions or even try to connect you guys. In that Weston Backcountry community on Facebook, that is where, our kind of hub, where we, focus on everything from gear conversations to trip planning, to finding different partners, to scheduling meetups. So definitely, join that group on Facebook. Make sure you join that or like that Weston Facebook page as well. And all of our Slay at Home series videos are available for free on our website. So also on our YouTube channel. And then, I'll let the rest of you guys say your goodbyes here, and make sure you tune in next week for a great conversation on Sierra touring zones over in California. We've got some great special guest, Will Sperry, another one of our fantastic Weston Guide Team, also guides for Golden State Guiding and Alpenglow Expeditions. And we've also got another great author, Nate Greenberg of Wolverine Publishing and Rack Up. They'll be discussing the Eastern Sierra and also the Western Sierra. So definitely tune in next week, and I will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And I'll let you panelists say your goodbyes as well, but thanks for tuning in, gang.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a blast being back.
Yeah, Ben, thanks a lot for hosting this and getting it all together. And thanks, Kiira and Matt, for contributing to this all. It was a pleasure chatting in the mountains with you, learning about some spots I don't get to travel to very often. And for you guys still watching, at Jere Burrell on Instagram, and my guide service website is www.guidedexposure.com. Come join me in the North Cascades.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure being part of this panel with Kiira and Jere. Thanks for having me, Ben. I appreciate. I'll talk about terrain to anybody, so it was great to talk about it here. You guys shred safely, and remember, come back better friends than you started. So take it easy. Thanks.
All right, gang. Thanks so much for joining us for another Slay at Home series. We will catch you next week at 6 p.m. and every Thursday. Thanks so much.